All right. So meanwhile, the words al-Qaeda absent from President Obama's address last night, which took place nearly 14 years since the 9/11 terror attacks and 2 weeks since the Charlie Hebdo massacre, believed to be carried out by two men connected to al-Qaeda and ISIS, and on the same day that al-Qaeda killed 37 people in Yemen. So last night was the very first time that this terror group got absolutely no mention whatsoever in the State of the Union address since February of 2001. And while the president did talk about ISIS, he steered clear of calling the global threat Islamic extremism when describing these terrorists.
In Iraq and Syria, American leadership, including our military power, is stopping ISIL's advance. We're also supporting a moderate opposition in Syria that can help us in this effort, and assisting people everywhere who stand up to the bankrupt ideology of violent extremism. Now, this effort will take time. It will require focus. But we will succeed.
And that was a section on ISIS and the global threat. Texas Republican Congressman Mike McCall is the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, and he joins me now. Chairman, good morning. Good to have you with us today. What was your reaction to the president's treatment of this issue?
He continues to defy reality. His false narrative, by not defining the enemy who they really are, it's radical Islamist extremist. And, you know, the fact that this prisoner who was associated with bin Laden and KSM was now released to Qatar, which was primarily responsible with funding ISIS, is a huge threat. He didn't even mention al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula that was behind the Paris attack. And then he talked about shutting down Guantanamo. And the fact of the matter is the head of AQAP in Yemen is a Gitmo detainee, or was a Gitmo detainee. So, again, I think he defies the reality of the threats out there in the world as it relates to radical Islamist extremism. And I think that's a very dangerous policy.
Yeah. I mean, you are chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee. Obviously, you spend a good portion of your time worrying about and working on the threat to this nation. We've seen what happened in France. We've seen what happened in Australia. We have seen what happened, in Canada. I could go on and on. I mean, obviously, there is a threat to the West and to the United States of America that we have to be ready for. And we didn't hear a whole heck of a lot about that last night, Chairman.
No, and I think it's on the minds of a lot of Americans when it comes to our security. You know, Paris could happen anytime, anywhere, including in the United States. It is an imminent threat, I believe, not only to Western Europe, but to the homeland. And so he spent, I would say, maybe a couple of paragraphs in the speech even addressing this issue. And I think it's because his policies have failed and he doesn't want to talk about it. He wants to talk about other programs that he thinks are more popular for him. The false narrative is not accurate. He says, the war is over. I'm going to shut down Guantanamo. Unfortunately, Martha, the war against al-Qaeda, AQAP, ISIS, radical Islamist extremists is very much alive and well.
Yeah, he said we are stopping ISIL's advance, which absolutely contradicts what we've learned about their movements in Syria and Iraq and the desires that they have to move into Lebanon and eastern Libya as well. And he said we're supporting the moderate opposition in Syria to help make that happen. And there's a lot of folks out there that think that we're doing precious little in that regard that will actually be effective.
Well, the opposition in Syria has been totally ineffective. The airstrikes have had limited success. It's been more of a policy of containment rather than a policy to destroy ISIS, and we're all for looking at an authorized use of military force, but we want an authorized use of military force that actually means something and means more than containment of ISIS, but rather their destruction.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, he called on Congress to support an authorization for the war against ISIS. How contentious is that debate going to be over what exactly defines that fight?
I do think this is one of those moments where Congress will come together because we all recognize the threat that ISIS presents to the world with foreign fighters to the United States, the threat in the region as well. So I think we can do this, but again, we're not going to support an AUMF that doesn't support a policy of destruction. This is more of the policy of containment has to end, and we need to really get to the core of ISIS in Iraq and Syria, which we're not currently doing.
I know that you have spent a lot of time on your bill, the Secure Our Borders First Act. and you're doing a markup on it today. How does that stand? And there's been some, reaction to whether or not there's enough internal enforcement in that bill. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, let me just say the internal enforcement piece will be handled by the Judiciary Committee. That's unrelated to Homeland Security. My committee deals with the border itself. When I go home, the number one mantra I hear is, Mr. Chairman, when are you going to secure that border? That's my constitutional responsibility. The administration has failed to do this. We're going to take the discretion away from the department, and we're going to mandate how they get this thing done through the deployment of assets, through the deployment of military assets from Afghanistan and other places to the southwest border and maritime as well. We also fully fund the National Guard. We allow the CBP to have access to federal lands. This is probably the strongest border security bill ever presented to the Congress. And it's my sincere hope that we all unite behind this bill, because it's so important when you look, Martha, at the threats that are out there, not only from the drug cartels that we know about and the drugs coming in poisoning our kids, but also the potential terrorist threat that exists. It's no longer time to wait. We now have the Senate. Yep. Now I believe it's time to act.
All right. So this may be one of those things that we see move through the House and the Senate and land on the president's desk. I know it deals with technology and fencing to secure the border and a lot of other things. Thank you very much, Chairman. Great to have you with us this morning. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Martha.